Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. In today's episode, we explore a deeply unsettling case known as love under duress. There's an old adage that says, a broken vase can never be mended, which illustrates the permanent damage or betrayal someone can experience. Even if a shattered vase is glued back together, the cracks remain, forever changing its essence and function. This metaphor is particularly poignant for those who have survived intimate exploitation, an issue our society has often downplayed to spare others from discomfort. Despite this, our cultural and legal frameworks have progressively recognized and addressed these painful experiences. Survivors are increasingly coming forward, telling their tales, and receiving the necessary support. This change has been driven by severe incidents that could no longer be overlooked. Among such cases is the tragic story of Antonia Barra from Chile, a case that galvanized the entire nation to demand justice against her perpetrator. Antonia's tragic end came to light on the evening of October 13, 2019. That day unfolded in a way her family could never have imagined. Her sister, Carla, was visiting their parents' home and went upstairs to greet Antonia, expecting a brief and casual conversation. However, upon finding Antonia seemingly asleep, Carla chose not to disturb her. As she was about to leave the room, she heard Antonia murmur a question about their mother and request that the lights be turned off. After expressing her love to Carla, Antonia turned away. Carla thought perhaps Antonia was just tired or not in the mood to talk, unaware of the deep turmoil her sister was experiencing. By 7 p.m. that evening, their mother, not getting any response from Antonia's room, went to check on her and discovered a horrifying scene. Antonia was lifeless, hanging above the floor. Overcome with shock, their mother, Marcela, frantically sought help from neighbors. Together, they took Antonia down and called for emergency services. Shortly after, Antonia's father, Alejandro, addressed the media. He vowed to uncover the reasons behind his daughter's drastic action and to seek justice. Antonia was known for her vivacity and intelligence, indicating that something significant had profoundly affected her. The autopsy later confirmed self-strangulation as the cause of death. Not waiting for official inquiries, the parents started their own investigation. They hired private detectives who meticulously reconstructed the last days of Antonia's life and identified the individual who had driven her to despair. The suspect was Martin Penis, a man born and residing in Temuco, Chile, the same city as Antonia. He came from a large family, but little was known about his personal life as information was scarce. His early life was unremarkable, except for a brief relationship with Daniela Alvarez, with whom he had a child. Their relationship ended shortly after the child's birth. Investigators discovered that between 2015 and 2017, Antonia and Martin had interacted through social media. Initially, their contact was limited to exchanging messages and commenting on each other's photos. Eventually, they met in person, which tragically set the stage for the dire events that followed. Antonia was born in the late 1980s into a strong, close-knit family. Her family home was large and spacious, well-suited for their needs, embodying the warmth and security that marked her early years. In a bustling household brimming with love and care, Alejandro and Marcela raised their 5 children, 4 daughters and 1 son. The children, known for their kindness and good behavior, seldom caused any significant trouble. Among them, Antonia stood out for her perceptiveness, responsibility, and ambition from an early age. She quickly became a source of immense pride for her parents. Excelling in school and maintaining a good rapport with her teachers, Antonia harbored aspirations that stretched far beyond her hometown. With dreams of traveling and leading a fulfilling life, Antonia's journey continued seamlessly into higher education. She was admitted to her university of choice and began studying in a highly sought-after program. As a freshman, she dove headfirst into her studies, actively participating in both academic and social activities. It was during this time that Antonia made a group of friends who shared her interests and aspirations. Among these friends was Consuela Ube, a law student with whom Antonia formed a particularly close bond. The friends would often go out shopping, attend parties together, and became inseparable. When Antonia went through a tough breakup with her boyfriend Rodrigo, It was Consuela who suggested that a change of scenery might help her recover. Eager to clear her mind and escape the lingering thoughts of her breakup, Antonia welcomed the idea. The friends planned a trip to celebrate Chile's Independence Day on September 18th, choosing the tourist-friendly town of Pucón as their destination. By sheer coincidence, this trip led to Antonia's paths crossing again with Martin, whom she had known from their online interactions. Martin was also heading to Pucón to attend an electronic music festival at a local club called the Black Room, where a DJ friend of his was performing. On the evening of September 17th, around 6:30 p.m., Antonia, Consuela, and 3 other friends, including Consuela's boyfriend, departed for Pucón. They had a smooth journey and chose different accommodations upon arrival, with the girls staying at a summer house owned by the Uribe family. As night fell around 8 p.m., the group prepared to head out to the Black Room Club. The night promised unforgettable experiences. Before leaving, Antonia exchanged messages with her father, who expressed his concern for her safety and advised her to be cautious around strangers. Antonia reassured him that prudence was her paramount trait. Meanwhile, law enforcement officials would later extensively interview Martin Panis regarding his interactions with Antonia. He maintained that their relationship was consensual and strongly denied any wrongdoing related to her tragic end. However, detectives held a different view, gathering their own evidence throughout the investigation. It was established that on September 17th, Martin left for Pucón around noon with his friends, planning to return the following day. They spent the evening in a rented house, enjoying conversations, jokes, and alcohol. When Antonia and Consuela arrived at the Black Room Club, they settled in, ordering food and drinks, and fully immersing themselves in the vibrant atmosphere. They enjoyed chatting and dancing extensively. The chance encounter between Antonia and Martin at the club appeared delightful. They spent the evening together, talking and dancing, clearly fond of each other. Antonia occasionally stepped away to rejoin her friend Consuela, who was also enjoying the night, and to interact with the male acquaintances she had traveled with, moving from one lively bar to another. Antonia hadn't realized how much the alcohol had affected her, likely due to the long drive and her empty stomach, circumstances she usually avoided. By around 6:45 a.m., Consuela found Antonia engaged in a lively chat with a mutual acquaintance named Amello. Sensing it was time to leave, Consuela suggested they head home. Antonia, however, felt invigorated and wanted to continue the evening. Despite her friend's advice to stop drinking and reconsider her decision, Antonia was resolute in her desire to stay at the club, leading Consuela to depart without her. This choice would later prove regrettable for Antonia. Amello, who became an unintended witness to the subsequent events, later detailed his observations during the investigation and in court. He noted that Martin approached Antonia and struck up a conversation. After a short interaction, Martin took her by the hand and led her towards the exit. Amello observed that Antonia seemed unusually passive, potentially confused by the alcohol, making it unclear whether she was actively participating in the conversation or just disoriented. While it appeared she did not resist being led away, her actual awareness of the situation was questionable. Amello assumed Antonia had agreed to follow Martin, although external surveillance footage later painted a different picture. According to the accounts of Martin's friends, the group left the club in 2 cars, but there was no space for Antonia and Martin, so they walked. Along their route, store surveillance footage captured moments that suggested Martin coerced Antonia into entering a store despite her barely being able to stand and resist. Martin, slightly more sober, managed to steer the situation. Throughout the night, cameras intermittently caught them. Martin was overly affectionate, attempting to kiss Antonia, who did not reciprocate and tried to pull away. They eventually entered a rented house, where none of his friends paid significant attention to Antonia's condition. Only Barbara, a 19-year-old who had joined them recently and hadn't been drinking, noticed both were intoxicated. The group went upstairs, and around 9 a.m., Consuela received a distressing voice message from Antonia. Initially incomprehensible, upon careful listening, Consuela discerned Antonia pleading to be picked up. Without knowing her exact location, Consuela used GPS to find her, accompanied by her boyfriend, Jose. Upon their arrival, they encountered Martin in a compromising state, hastily covering himself with a pillow. When Consuela inquired about Antonia's whereabouts, he feigned ignorance. They found Antonia in one of the upstairs rooms, lying on a bed in her underwear, quietly crying. Jose quickly carried her out to their car. Consuela attempted to converse with Antonia, who was too distraught to respond beyond her tears. Back at the summer house, Antonia gradually opened up about the night's events. She revealed that Martin had taken advantage of her against her will, leaving her feeling utterly powerless. Her memories were hazy, and while she could not recall all the details, the violation she experienced was unmistakable. This betrayal had occurred upstairs in the rented house, after which Martin had simply left her alone and vanished. The severity of the incident profoundly affected Antonia, marking a distressing chapter in her life. Jose and Consuela urged Antonia to report the ordeal to the police and seek justice, but Antonia was overwhelmed by fear. She worried about how her parents and the public would react upon discovering what had happened. Choosing to endure the trauma in silence, she hoped to heal on her own terms and requested that her friends tell no one about the incident. During this poignant conversation, Antonia received a light-hearted message from her father, inquiring how she was doing and teasing her about possibly having drunk too much. Determined not to arouse suspicion, she responded in her typical jovial manner, which only served to mask the turmoil she was experiencing internally. The following day, Antonia confronted Martin, seeking clarity and perhaps an apology. However, Martin was dismissive and arrogant, insisting that their encounter had been consensual. This conversation dashed her hopes of hearing the truth from him, and she realized she would need to find a way to move forward without the closure she desired. At the court hearing that would later take place, psychotherapists testified that Antonia was suffering from intimacy trauma syndrome at the time of the incident. This condition is characterized by significant disruptions in physical, emotional, cognitive, and interpersonal behaviors. Symptoms can emerge immediately after the trauma or even years later, manifesting as severe anxiety, confusion, bouts of hysterics, and uncontrollable crying. Antonia was caught in the acute phase of this syndrome, battling distressing sensations and a compulsive desire to cleanse herself, which sometimes led to nausea and vomiting. For 3 weeks following the incident, Antonia maintained her silence, attempting to behave as if nothing had changed. A childhood friend later admitted that she hadn't noticed anything unusual about Antonia during this time. However, her classmates observed signs of memory impairments and disorganization, symptoms associated with her trauma. One classmate pointed out a noticeable decline in Antonia's academic performance, a departure from her usually disciplined nature. The trial brought many witnesses to Antonia's defense, including friends, acquaintances, and classmates, all attesting to her character and the impact of the incident on her well-being. But what really catalyzed Antonia's tragic decision to end her life? A turning point seemed to come when her traumatic experience became known to an ex-boyfriend, but the information reached him distorted and in a very unflattering light. When Antonia tried to correct the misconceptions, stating that she was not at fault and that the information was grossly exaggerated, Rodrigo, her ex-boyfriend, refused to believe her. Additionally, the day before the tragic event, Martin had called her. The content of their conversation remains unknown, but it may have included threats, adding to her distress. In the hours leading up to her untimely death, Antonia sent a farewell message to her boyfriend and left a note in her family's chat group. These final messages were heart-wrenching, filled with expressions of despair and apologies, hinting at the unbearable pain she felt. As the community later learned of her fate, the shock and mourning extended beyond her immediate family. The court hearing that followed aimed to shed light on the events leading to Antonia's death, with testimonies from various witnesses painting a picture of a young woman overwhelmed by a situation she felt powerless to escape. The psychological expert testimonies particularly highlighted how deeply the trauma had affected her, indicating that while Antonia had tried to cope in solitude, the cumulative pressures and threats had pushed her to a breaking point. Antonia's story is a stark reminder of the devastating impact of such traumas and the importance of seeking timely help. It also underscores the crucial role of empathy and support from those around us, as isolation can exacerbate the suffering of those in distress. As this case unfolded, It prompted discussions on how society handles such sensitive issues and the measures needed to support those who find themselves in similar situations. In a poignant moment, Alejandro shared a childhood video of Antonia on social media. In the video, she was dancing and laughing joyfully, a stark contrast to the turmoil she later endured. This glimpse into her happier times underscored how deeply she yearned for her former self, before her life was irreversibly altered by trauma. The sharing of this video marked a turning point, not just for her family, but for the entire nation. It highlighted the stark difference between the vibrant young woman she once was and the shadows she had become entangled with. The impact of her story, amplified by her father's courage to share it publicly, resonated deeply across the country. Antonia's name became a symbol, appearing on posters, in social media hashtags, and even graffitied on walls. This public outpouring of support catalyzed a significant response. Within just a week, several other women came forward with similar allegations against Martin Prentis, leading to the addition of 6 new charges spanning actions from 2010 to 2019. Martin, now revealed as a repeat offender, was taken into custody. Amidst these developments, Martin's family petitioned the court to protect their personal information, which had been leaked online. They argued that their constitutional rights to honor and respect for private life were being violated, citing the barrage of insults, aggressive messages, and spread of false information they were subjected to. They suspected that the Barr family was involved in these actions. On June 12, 2020, the Tomoko court granted their request, imposing restrictions on Antonia's relatives to refrain from disclosing information about Martin's family on social media or making any potentially damaging publications. This legal decision sparked widespread outrage among the Chilean public, who felt that it unjustly protected Martin. On July 21, the Barr family filed an appeal with the Supreme Court, but it was subsequently rejected. That same month, Martin's lawyer sought further protective measures for his client, even as he faced official charges for several attacks. The case, now widely referred to as the Antonia case, became emblematic of a broader movement for justice for victims of violence. It galvanized many women who, inspired by Antonia's story, dared to come forward with their own experiences of abuse after many years of silence. However, on July 22, a surprising turn of events occurred when the court altered its preventive measures, shifting from detention to house arrest for Martin. This decision was met with immediate backlash, as it seemed to diminish the severity of his alleged crimes. The judge maintained that this change did not predetermine the final sentence, yet the public remained skeptical. The situation escalated as the prosecutor pursued charges against Martin for 5 instances of misconduct, but the court only recognized 2. Massive protests erupted nationwide, with thousands expressing their dismay at the halted investigations into certain allegations and the perceived leniency of the house arrest decision. The public outcry was so intense that the authorities felt compelled to act, submitting a request to the appeals court to reconsider the decision. Responding swiftly, the judiciary revoked Martin's house arrest and reinstated him into custody. Additionally, the court eliminated the statute of limitations for 2 of the cases involving intimate violence, a significant legal shift. Amidst these legal battles, Alejandro, together with various feminist organizations, began drafting a bill aimed at establishing clearer punishments for crimes of this nature. He stressed that society should never remain indifferent when a woman is led away by a man, particularly when she shows no resistance and is visibly intoxicated. This state of vulnerability, he argued, necessitated more stringent legal measures to protect potential victims and prevent such tragedies from recurring. The drafting of this bill was not just a response to his daughter's ordeal, but a proactive step towards changing the legal landscape to better safeguard women against violence. In February 2021, a significant development occurred in the ongoing investigation of Martin Prentis. Forensic analysis of his phone unveiled a troubling collection of photos displaying women's underwear, an indication of his perverse pride in his so-called conquests. This discovery added to the mounting evidence against him, culminating in a police report that spanned nearly 400 pages. It included statements from a variety of sources: victims, witnesses, people who had been close to both Martin and Antonia, and acquaintances from their childhoods. Martin's childhood teacher provided insight into his early years, describing him as a smart and cheerful child who exhibited an unusually keen interest in intimate topics. Some women, who knew Martin since their younger days, recalled uncomfortable encounters where he inappropriately touched them, although these actions were not taken seriously at the time due to their young age. On June 14, 2022, the criminal court in Tomoko began its sessions, expected to extend over a month. The prosecution's case was robust, supported by a plethora of evidence, expert testimonies, and witness statements. One piece of video footage was particularly damning, clearly showing that Antonia was unable to control or escape from the situation she was thrust into. After rigorous legal proceedings, on August 26, Martin was sentenced to 20 years in prison for crimes against intimacy and acts of intimacy-related aggression. However, the case took a turn when, on December 29, the Supreme Court accepted the defense's appeal, finding faults in the initial verdict, and a new trial was scheduled for the spring of 2023. During this tumultuous period, the efforts of the Barr family catalyzed significant legislative changes. They were instrumental in the drafting of Antonia's law, aimed at enhancing existing legislation to ensure that anyone who committed an act of violence that led a victim to end their life would face inevitable imprisonment. By March 16, the landscape of the legal team defending Martin had shifted dramatically, with the original attorneys resigning and his case being taken over by public defense. The second trial began on April 24, 2024, addressing 5 cases of violence and 2 cases of forcible intimacy. During this trial, Martin Prentis waived his right to remain silent and attempted to explain his actions by claiming they were committed under severe alcohol intoxication. The prosecutor countered this defense by arguing that Martin's choice to drink with the women made them particularly vulnerable. On July 7, 2023, Martin was found guilty in federal court. The prosecution demanded a harsh sentence of 41 years in prison, reflecting the severity of his crimes. However, on July 28, 2023, 31-year-old Martin Prentis was ultimately sentenced to 17 years in prison for 7 intimacy-related offenses committed against 6 victims. Considering the time already spent in custody, he would serve 14 years. The tragic case of Antonia Barra not only brought to justice a dangerous offender, but also helped to expose how many more innocent lives might have been affected by his actions. It underscored the fine line between harassment and flirtation, and how quickly someone can cross into dangerous territory. The societal changes following the case have shifted perceptions of victims of violence, highlighting the risks associated with uncontrolled desires and the inability to respect personal boundaries. Ultimately, this case reminds us that the body and soul of another person are as fragile and invaluable as crystal. This story is a testament to the power of persistence in seeking justice and the importance of legislative evolution to protect potential victims. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking stories ahead.